Thanks. Thank you for inviting me to be here. What I'd like to do today is to present the way to think about freemium marketing from the point of view of a publisher. And that's indeed the target for this talk today for me. If you're a publisher and you're contemplating freemium marketing, what do you think about? What's the process that you have to go through? Now, along the way here, some topics I'd like to touch. First, I want to define freemium marketing, and also to get into the economics of digital publishing, which are not quite, I think, what most of us think they are. At least they will not be what we think they are in the future. But mostly I want to focus on the notion that freemium is if there's a hand in the back. Okay. Mostly I want to focus on the notion that freemium publishing is a form of product sampling. And I want to give some illustrations of that and what product sampling means in the information business. And then we'll touch on some other issues that are meaningful, I think, for this particular audience, in particular the distinction between consumer and institutional marketing. So first, what is freemium marketing? Clearly, the idea of freemium marketing is that you use free goods to build an audience, and then you try to upsell that audience to a premium service. As a friend of mine said, you give away the bacon and then you sell the eggs. And then he corrected himself and says, no, you give away the eggs and then you sell the bacon. So the question here is, what's the relationship between these two? What is the thing you wish to give away, and then what, in fact, is going to be your premium service? Essentially, it's a form of tactical marketing. It is not strategic marketing. It is a way of attracting audiences to bring into your marketing funnel and then to seek conversions. And it has virtues, and the clear one is, especially in the world of digital publishing, we know that bits are free. That is to say, the marginal cost for moving content around the internet is zero or close to zero. And that naturally gives rise to an interest in product sampling, because there's no incremental cost for that product sample that you send out there. Now, we should be aware that that idea has not only occurred to the people in this room, it's occurred to everybody who's dealing with the internet. So the amount of free content continues to explode, and that creates a new challenge, which is how do you differentiate your particular free offering from everybody else's. So once again, you get back into the conundrum of how do you call attention to yourself. The limitations here, though, are pretty significant. The first question is, how do you attract an audience in the first place, which is the age-old problem. That gets you back into good old meat and potatoes marketing of how to bring people to your website. You have the cost of maintaining the free service. It may be free to the user, but it's not free to the producer. And then you've got the very big question, the challenge of how do you convert these users. If you bring millions and millions of people to your website and you convert none of them, you haven't done a very good job. Clearly, what you need to have is a good balance between robust web traffic and a meaningful way of converting those folks. There also are special limitations in institutional markets, which we'll get to in a second. So, we know that information wants to be free, and we know that it wants to be expensive. Interestingly, Tim O'Reilly misquoted Stuart Brand the other day. He said information wants to be free, information wants to be valuable. That's not what Stuart Brand said. He said information wants to be free, information wants to be expensive. There's a very big difference between the two. But when you start to look at information from the point of view of digital distribution, the question is, are the bits truly free? First, we know there's a difference between the fixed and the variable costs for any kind of publication. Most of the people in this room, and certainly I did, grew up in the print world where you had low to modest fixed costs and very high variable costs. You then moved to digital publishing where you have very, very high fixed costs and very low variable costs. But I don't think that's the real issue. The real issue is that we are thinking about the marginal cost being close to zero because we've been living in a wireline economy. And ever since Netcom introduced the famous all-you-can-eat plan for, I think it was $20 at the time, people have gotten used to the idea of fixed pricing on the internet, and people have gotten used to the idea that there's no marginal cost for the information you pull down. But if you move into the wireless world, that's changing. If anybody has recently gone to Verizon for a new account for a wireless phone, you see that you now have data caps. And data caps are essentially a way of getting around the net neutrality notion, and it's going to be a way of introducing costs for the usage of this data. So although we're currently living in a world where the marginal cost of information on the internet is in fact zero or close to it, over time, since we are migrating from wireline to wireless networks, we're going to find these data caps imposing taxes on content, and we will in effect see the end of the free bits. So this notion that bits are free is a historical moment, and we're coming to the end of that particular period. As I mentioned before, because you've got these, at least at this time, these low or zero marginal costs, you've got extensive product sampling out there. And it is becoming explosive because you really can't do a search on anything on Google without bringing up many, many more items than you could possibly sift through. So one of the challenges of working in this free economy is this issue of differentiating the content, and that is something that potentially undermines a freemium model. The other thing that I find intriguing about this is that if you begin to work with the free model, you've essentially made a structural change in the way you think about your business. And when I say free, I mean the freemium model. Typically, a publisher invests in content and the creation of content. In the freemium model, what you're beginning to do is you're saying, well, the free portion is there in order to entice somebody for the paid portion. So what we've then done is we've made a conversion. We have converted editorial investment into marketing expense. And if you think about the psychology is very different. If you're a publisher, you invest in content and you want the best content because it attracts the biggest audience and you can then make the most money. If, on the other hand, it's a marketing expense, in marketing the challenge is what's the least amount of money I can spend in order to get my desired outcome. So this is the built-in structural challenge of freemium marketing for a content creator, in that instead of being incentivized to create the best content, you're always being incentivized to create the least content necessary to effect a conversion. It's a fundamental shift in the psychology of how you'd go about this. And finally, as you work through this, you spend a lot of time trying to figure out how much material do you have to give away to effect the appropriate conversion rate. If you have a book of 200 pages, what's the right amount? Do you give away just the table of contents? Do you give away 10 pages? Do you give away a chapter? Do you give away 50 pages? Do you give away the whole book? Well, the answer is there is no answer to that. You have to do this by trial and error. And of course, marketers are going out with freemium services, and they test this. Well, when we had 10 pages being given away, what was our conversion rate? When we had 12 pages being given away, what was our conversion rate? At what point do you give away too much and you actually start lowering your conversion rate? So you keep going back and forth until you find the optimal relationship. I mentioned this is a form of product sampling, and I want to work through some examples, some from the information industry and some from other industries, just to put this into a broader context. I gave you the example before of giving away 10 free pages, and then you entice somebody to try to sell the book. That's a fairly obvious thing, and probably many people in the room have done something like this already. You also have services that work a little bit differently. You might have the free sharing of journal articles. This is what Mendeley did. And Mendeley's business model, prior to the acquisition by Elsevier, Mendeley's model was to essentially create a file sharing service and then to try to sell hosting services to its user base. So you give away the content, which of course Mendeley did not own, but you give away the content and then you try to sell IT services on the premium end. But if you go into your supermarket, you have other things. You walk up to a little table and you see some cheese there and crackers as a person very courteously handing you a piece of cheese on that cracker. And of course, the cheese is free and the cracker is free and you're being enticed to buy the wheel of cheese. That's product sampling too. What's the difference between that and the freemium model in publishing? I mean, economically there is none. It's the same kind of thing. Or to have a more egregious example, you accept an invitation for a free lunch, and the free lunch is accompanied by a seminar on why you should buy real estate in Florida or something like that. You give away the lunch, and then you are enticed to try to purchase the real estate. Once again, that's the basic economic issue that we're dealing with. And I'm saying this because it is important not to romanticize freemium marketing. There is an impulse to think about it in romantic terms because the word free makes us think of an open society and it makes us think that we're back at Woodstock and everything is great. This is a marketing issue and this is a business issue, and the end point here is not what is free. The important point is what is premium, because that is what you're trying to drive this to. So there are restrictions and different ways of making these restrictions on the free content that you are using to entice users. I was in preparation for this meeting, I looked up freemium in Wikipedia, and it was really quite extraordinary. They have an entire taxonomy of all the different ways you can restrict the free item in order to then entice somebody to purchase the premium item. And I would really encourage you to look at this article. It's quite extensive. So here are just a few examples. You can restrict things by time. You can look at something for 5 minutes, say, and after 5 minutes, the meter begins to run and you have to pay for things. You may restrict things by channel. So you may say that things are free to consumers, but institutional markets have to pay for them. Now that has some very interesting implications because, in effect, we're asking libraries to begin to underwrite the cost of consumer access to information. Libraries that are already strapped for cash are being asked to take on a bigger and bigger burden. This is not a sustainable model for anybody. You might have a freemium model that works by feature. So, for example, you may give away the content, but you may say to search on that content you have to pay a fee. So you are essentially disaggregating the content and the IT services that you're wrapping around that content. Or finally, you might do this by capacity. One example is that the first user is free, but subsequent users have to pay a fee. I'm really intrigued with the way SurveyMonkey, if you've used that application, I'm really intrigued with them. They have this interesting thing where you can do an online survey using SurveyMonkey. And if you haven't used it yourself, you certainly have taken surveys from SurveyMonkey. I get about 10 in my inbox every day. I think there's a figure of something like 10 free questions, and after 10 questions you have to start to pay. And I was wondering, how much time did the marketing people spend to try to figure out what was the right number of questions to give away? Was it 8? Was it 15? And now they've hit on 10. And SurveyMonkey is, of course, a hugely successful business using that freemium model. I put a little et cetera here on the slide, and the point here is simply that there is no limit to the different ways you can find meaningful, economically useful restrictions on the free component. The limitation is the imagination of the marketer, and that's what this is ultimately about. When we turn to this issue of consumer and institutional markets, it gets a little bit interesting to me. You may have a situation, whenever you're dealing with freemium marketing, you're dealing with establishing a direct-to-consumer relationship. It's D2C marketing. Most of the people in this room are not consumer marketers. Some of you are. Most of us are not consumer marketers. We are basically institutional marketers, or we market to membership societies. But when you're working the freemium model, you're out there in the open internet, the wilds of the internet, and you suddenly are playing the exact same game as Google, Facebook, Yahoo, and everybody else. So suddenly you're dealing with a whole different environment, trying to find out of that mass of the 7 billion people on the planet, those 4,000 who care about the content that you create, because we create highly specialized content. Maybe 4,000 is too big a number. Maybe 400 is a better number. So you're suddenly making a change in your organization's way of thinking. Instead of thinking about your institutional markets, where the collections librarians around the world who work in your area, now you have to think about the individual end user out there, and you have to pluck that person from those 7 billion people on the planet. This is a major, major shift in the way you think about the marketing of your organization, and freemium marketing requires you to do that. When you do this, of course, you try to upsell your product to individuals, but you also try to find a way to upsell the product to libraries by adding some other kinds of services of some kind. For many scholarly publishers, I think it's important to realize that the real issue is not free content versus paid content. The real issue is consumer marketing versus institutional marketing. We get too hung up on the digital question and not enough on the more important structural questions of the nature of the marketplace you're trying to address. So when you put this into a broader context, the thing to bear in mind is that free is but just one tactic of many. If you think about the marketing departments in your organization, you are spending money on Google AdWords, you have print advertising, you have online advertising, you send out mailings, you have booths at trade shows, it goes on and on. The freemium model is just one more arrow in the quiver. That's all it is. It's one more tactic to use. You may want to consider using it alongside these other things. You may want to continue to use social media. Of course, why not have a Twitter feed? A Twitter feed is a great thing to do. Why not have one? Why not continue to advertise where you found it to be effective? Why not issue other content, such as white papers and so forth? All of these things don't disappear when you begin to use a freemium model. The question is, which is the best mechanism for reaching the intended audience? It goes without saying, though, that if you can't bring people to your website, you can't use the freemium model. You can say that something is free, but unless people know about that, it doesn't make a difference. So you still have the challenge of getting them to the website in the first place. The freemium model doesn't do that. You have to communicate to people that you have a freemium model. So there's another step in this marketing process. The successful implementations are going to have that balance between the web traffic and your ability then to drive that conversion rate. So how do you put this into context? This is the basic primer on a high level of web marketing. Well, the first issue, you've got to get a user to come to your site for the first time. I mean, that's the obvious point. The person has to come to your site for the first time. The second point is you want your user to return. You have to get the user to come to the site for a second time. Otherwise, you've wasted all that effort. You want people to continue to return to your site. Now, it goes without saying that there's implications here. That means you need to have a constant flow of new content on your site. The site then becomes expensive to maintain. We're going through this now with the Scholarly Kitchen. The problem with the Scholarly Kitchen is it's a lot of work. And we're having trouble, getting a post up every day. And Kent Anderson is working himself to death to try to get a post up every day. But the fact is that the day you miss a post, your traffic drops, and it continues to drop. So you have this need to keep driving new content all the time. The expense is enormous to continue to do that. After you get that user to return to your site, you want that user then to go to work for you. So you want to motivate that user to use his or her own personal network and bring other people to the site, which of course is what we call viral marketing. Now, the importance of viral marketing is not that it's viral and it's not that it's on the internet. The importance of it is that it's inexpensive. Now, if you had the kind of budget where you could buy up every free minute at the Super Bowl, and you can advertise in every major sporting event and so forth, and you had no concern about your marketing cost, you would need viral marketing. It is frequently thought that it's somehow a superior form of marketing in terms of its reach. Its reach is actually less substantial than traditional media, especially television. The real issue of viral marketing is that its reach, when looked at as in ratio to its cost, the cost is very, very small. That's the reason you use viral marketing. It's a cost issue, not an effectiveness issue. But if you can get a viral campaign going of some kind, you now have more and more users coming to your site at a fairly economical basis. Then finally you get to number 4. You've brought these users to your site, and now you want them to take an action. Now the ideal action is they engage in a transaction. But that may be too much to hope for every time. What you want to do is every time someone comes to the site, they have to take some action on the site. And the key is that you want to move from information to actionable information. When you get involved with actionable information, you may be doing things like enticing a user to give up some personal data. Well, here's my email address, or here's my mobile phone number, or yes, please ship this free coffee mug to me, and here's my mailing address. Now you've got a zip code. When you have a zip code, you know more about a person than you could possibly imagine because all the databases of zip codes. And here again, you're integrating freemium marketing with other marketing techniques from other areas. Well, the key point about freemium marketing is it's step 4. And in order to do an effective freemium marketing campaign, you've got to do 1, 2, and 3 first. Freemium marketing is an actionable item and requires that you have built up this process. So it requires antecedents before it can be effective. Now, a number of people in this room, and certainly a lot of people in scholarly publishing in general, and certainly to judge by the numbers, about half the people who work in scholarly publishing are working for not-for-profit mission-based organizations. When you look at the freemium model there, things change. If you're in a commercial organization, you know what the game is. The game is how do you get the best return on capital. That's the game, and there is no alternative for that game. That's the game you have to play. That doesn't mean you don't create great products, but you're creating great products in order to get a high return on capital. If you're with a mission-based organization, though, you maybe want to disseminate the information as part of the mission of your organization. So the free component of the freemium service has a different value, and you're really asking the free component to do double duty. On one hand, The free component is an attempt to achieve the mission of your organization by disseminating critical information to the targeted user base of your organization. On the other hand, you still want that conversion if possible in order to gather some revenue to fund the enterprise. An obvious example of this is the use of free books online, where you can only view the books through a browser. It's not a great way to read a book, you know. So you're looking at a book through a browser, and of course the mission is there. The mission is accomplished. Everybody has access to this, regardless of their own economic position. But some people then will say, you know, I really want a better reading experience. I don't want to fly coach. I want to fly business class. And they then can elect to pay for a print-on-demand version, or perhaps they're able to download this so they're able to manipulate the file on their computer in some way. We see this example everywhere now in the university press world, in the academic library world today, but there are other examples of this. The problem is that when you're dealing with the goal of giving away as much content as you can as part of your mission, it makes the conversions harder and harder. So I would say that the freemium model in the not-for-profit area is more challenging than it is in the for-profit area, because in the for-profit area it's essentially just a marketing campaign, but in the not-for-profit area it's more complicated because it has to satisfy a mission at the same time. We shouldn't forget that whether you're doing for-profit work or not-for-profit work, you still have to pay to support that free content. That cost does not go away. So how do you build a plan? Well, I put in cap letters here that you always have to publish the very best content and you can't compromise on this. Now, this may seem like a platitude, but the reason I say this is because you've got this structural temptation to keep reducing the quality of the free component because your real interest is on the premium side. And you have to hold the line against that. And there's another reason to say this as well, and that is, I don't know many people who got into the publishing world, whether it's trade publishing or K-12 publishing or academic publishing or any category. I don't know anybody who says, I want to go into publishing because I want a better conversion rate on my model. You know? That's not what drives us. That's not why we're in this room together. You get involved with it because you care about the editorial products that your organization creates. So you have to be very, very steadfast in maintaining that push for high editorial content, even as the numbers are telling you you can skimp a little bit in the freemium model. The second point to make is that you want to insert this model into an overall marketing plan. Now there's a catch. You need an overall marketing plan before you can insert this. You have to really think about the whole program at the same time. It goes without saying you have to use any means possible, at least any legitimate means possible, to get people to your website the first time, because it's then and only then that you're able to act upon them to take them through the marketing funnel. And when you do that, you then are focusing on that conversion rate, which is the premium side, which is how you got into this activity in the first place. Thank you.